There's still a few people shuffling in, but let's get started. I don't want those that were punctual to still be waiting. First of all, again, I want to thank you all for being here. I've been doing my webinar series since really since COVID, since March. About every other week, I've been facilitating a webinar, a live webinar on social skills, and always tying it into some feature. Today is going to be a really big one: the impact of technology. Eesh. The impact of technology on social skills. When I was young, I never thought that the world and society would be the way it is, and ultimately, that's what we're gonna talk about today. If you were a live audience in person, I would take your questions as we went. But we found with the webinars that it has been a little bit disruptive to the flow. So I'm going to ask, if you do have questions, let's just hold off until the end, just jot them down or write them down. And we have a couple options, including the chat feature where you can ask questions, or also you can raise your hand. And if you raise your hand, you'll be able to ask your question so that all the participants can hear it. So if you wouldn't mind holding off, unless there's something like really pertinent or important, then jump in. But I'm going to answer it a little bit quickly. We found that people didn't like the questions in the middle as much. So if you wouldn't mind holding off until the end, before we begin, let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Christopher Haley. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I actually own 2 different private practices, but I'm here on behalf of my Social Skills Center. Tonight, I'm a lifelong believer that social skills are, I call them essential life skills. And yes, even in 2020, I think that social skills are essential life skills. If you want to be successful in life, my belief is you have to be good at this. You have to be able to communicate clearly. You have to be an exceptional listener. You have to know how to network. Connecting with others is going to serve you well in life. So for the last, it's been now almost 21 years, I've been teaching social skills to children, adolescents, and adults. I've done it in an individual therapy format. A lot of the help I've done over the last 20 plus years has been in social skills groups. At the Social Skills Center, we're facilitating over 20 unique social skills groups each and every week for younger kids all the way up through our older adults. And I'm doing that with the assistance of my great associate, Scott Miller. And what's really unique about us is it's, first of all, rare to find a practice that just does social skills. And that's really what we truly specialize in. But we match our groups. Most practices just match their groups by age. We match our groups by both age and level of functioning, which is so important. In order to really benefit from that group process, you need to have a solid match and feel truly comfortable with the group members that are around you. And now with the days of telehealth, ever since March and COVID unfortunately hit us here, we've gone fully to telehealth. I'm actually in my home, which is where I saw all my clients today. I'm in the office in my house. But now with telehealth, anyone in Virginia can participate in our social skills program, which is awesome. And we always get questions about, well, do you take insurance? The answer, believe it or not, is yes, we do take some health insurance, which will reimburse for both individual social skills sessions and our social skills groups. Excuse me. So today we're going to be talking about technology, like I said earlier, and we're going to be talking about technology in 2020. I wanted to start the webinar by just sharing the facts. The facts are, some of them are jaw-dropping. Some of them are going to be like, yeah, it doesn't really surprise me. How about this? How about this for a fact? There are 3.5 billion with a B, 3.5 billion daily active users of social media. Yeah, that is nearly half the population of the world are daily social media users. And if you break this down here in the United States and you break it down by age, this won't be a surprise to you. The baby boomers, 48% research says daily active users of social media. If you're a Gen Xer like me, I was born in 1970, I'm 50 years old, 77% daily users. And again, not a surprise, the millennials, the younger ones, over 90% daily users of social media. So let me ask y'all a question. 91% of social media is done on what device? Think, give me your answer. Yeah. Cell phone. 91% of social media is done on this. Yeah, Doris, thank you again. You got it. Absolutely, 91%. And then another question for you. Take a guess at this one. And you can even use it, put it in your answer in the chat section. That would actually be funny. The average mobile user checks his or her phone how many times per day? Someone put it in the chat what you think. How many times per day? Is it 10 times per day? Are you looking at the phone? Is it 20 times per day? This is average. This is average. Anyone have a response for that one? To me, it is 50. Thank you, Doris. You are wrong. Let's take Doris's answer of 50 and multiply it times 3. 150 times, this is what's going on throughout the course of the average cell phone user's day. A lot of times the head is down and buried in the phone, and we're going to get to that. I also, from a stat standpoint, I picked a random group of kids. I picked 8 to 12-year-olds, and I just was curious, how much time are they spending watching on their electronics, screen time? 4 to 6 hours a day on average for 8 to 12-year-olds. And what's unbelievable, I guess it is believable, is that number gets higher as kids get older. So 4 to 6 average per day screen time, 8 to 12-year-olds. So we all know that healthy social skills are learned through healthy face-to-face interactions that we know. And whether that be through, modeling mom and dad, modeling your peers, modeling other people. And this is how we learn positive communication skills. It's how we learn exceptional listening skills. It's how we learn how to connect with others, how we learn to decipher like nonverbal social cues. It's how we learn empathy. We learn this through modeling and observation. But in 2020, for many people, texting, this is the motion that has replaced face-to-face communication. What happens with texting? All the nonverbals are missed. The eye contact, the posture, the body positioning, the tone and volume in your voice. You're not going to get that from a text message typically. I'll ask you another question. How many of you out there have misinterpreted the intent of a text message before? I have. You look at a text message, oh, clearly that person's upset with me. That wasn't even the case at all. It's a total misread on my part because I didn't have their face and their body and the nonverbals to look at. So I hate to say it, but technology kind of now threatens to undermine the future of our face-to-face interactions. And I have here in the Haley household, I have 4 teenagers, from 8th grade all the way up through high school. So I tell my teens this, and all the teens that I work with in the Social Skills Center, is while technology is taking over, I always come back to this. Your first job interview, I tell my kids, it almost definitely is still going to be a face-to-face interview. Now with COVID, it might be in person, it might be on Zoom, but you're going to be looking at that person. You'll be looking at the person who's the hiring manager or whoever is interviewing you, and it's your job. It's your job to convince that person that you're the one. And if you've lived your life like this, and you've lived your life like this, texting, how are you going to have the skill set to convince that person that you're the one? And unemployment, it's higher with the pandemic. And so there's probably, 20 people applying for the same job at McDonald's that you are. And you have to convince that person that you're the one. If your head's in your phone and in your electronics all the time, you just don't have the skill set to do it. So let me flip to our first slide here, because let's take a look at what we're seeing with technology. Oh, there we go. Okay, we're good. Sometimes, again, being 50, I'm not the most technologically advanced person. I have a tendency, that's why I messed up my camera last time. But I'm doing good so far. So here's what we're seeing. Number one, and a lot of these things will make sense to you guys as we go through them. We're seeing a significant decrease in eye contact. If your eyes are always going towards your phone and the phone is always there within arm's reach, it's this. It's 150 times a day. So they're not real good with the social nuance of proper eye contact. We're seeing a whole bunch of severely limited phone skills. I see teens in the practice They can't call up and order a pizza. And I said, really? You can't, or you can't call Papa John's? If I gave you the number and say, I'd like a large cheese and pepperoni, they say, why would I do that? Go to my cell phone and order it there online. Like that is true. That is true. I see, this just happened last week. I see young adults that they can't call up a doctor's office to schedule an appointment. Now, maybe some doctor's offices, you can do that online. My doctor, he's old school. I have to call him up to get my yearly physical. So what does that mean? That if you can't schedule your appointment online, that you just don't go to the doctor? It's kind of a little bit scary. We're seeing losing I call it the art of the conversation. The constant pull to the phone means you're not truly invested in this. And those are the kids that struggle with reciprocal communication. I'll call it the art or the dance of an in-depth talk with someone. Those days they're almost gone. I was doing an intake, so I'd met this gentleman, maybe 19 years old. So last week or maybe the week before. And again, the meeting was on Zoom because we're still doing telehealth due to the pandemic. And at some point in the middle of the conversation that we're doing via telehealth, I hear his phone ring. So he hadn't muted his phone, which would have been respectful. Didn't do that. Phone rings. He says, "Excuse me 1 second, sir." Hits the mute button, picks up the phone, yaps away. And about a minute later, he puts it down, puts the phone back, turns the mute button off so I can hear him. He's like, "Yeah, sorry about that." I'm like, we got some things to work on, guy. Because let me tell you about what my experience is with that. It's a little bit of a disrespectful thing to do when you're speaking with someone, but I'll guarantee you this young man that's the way he operated. And we had spoken about modeling before. Maybe that's the way his parents unfortunately operated too. So I've got some work to do with him. Number 4 is not paying attention to those around you. How many times have you ever almost been run over by someone who's walking with their head down? I mean, it happens all the time. There's a cutesy little town here in Northern Virginia. It's called Occoquan in Prince William County. Back in the days, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. It's called Pokemon Go. It was like the hot thing maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago. So this little town of Occoquan apparently was a hot spot for where you go to, I'm not sure what Pokemon is, where you go to capture the creatures or where you duel with the creatures or the little things. But because it was a hot spot, everyone would go there with their cell phones because Pokemon Go is done on your cell phone. And you get these pockets of 4 or 5 people walking down the sidewalk, heads down, not a care what's in front of them, just going around like this, trying to capture or collect their Pokemons. It was a sight to see. Again, what's even more dangerous, I have 2 of my kids are driving with the youth of today, and adults are guilty of this too. The texting while driving, heads down, texting. It's scary. It's scary. I can take a group of kids coming down the sidewalk and I just walk around them, but when people around you are driving and texting, so dangerous. Obviously, technology now has led to, again, I think you guys know this, decreased reading. Much less readers out there than there used to be. And historically, there's always been this great connection between reading and IQ. The more you read, the higher your IQ is. Reading increased your knowledge base. Reading, it improved your vocabulary. Certainly, it enhanced your critical thinking skills. And with Twitter, Twitter used to be technology. Woohoo! Twitter used to be 140 characters. That's what you were limited to. Now, wow, they've expanded. They've doubled it. Now you're limited to 280 characters on Twitter to deliver your message. So what do you get? You get these little quick bursts, these little snippets of information. I bet you there's not a whole lot of deep, I'm not on Twitter, but I bet there's not a whole lot of deep communication on Twitter. Not a whole lot at all. How do you expand on your thoughts? How do you get how do you get connected with someone? How do you get to know someone when you're limited to 280 characters or less? Could Shakespeare have done that? Hemingway? Mark Twain? How do you tell a story in 280 characters? Well, I've taken the liberty of pulling a Shakespeare here. Here's Shakespeare on a Twitter, what do you call it? Twitter feed. Here's Shakespeare on a tweet. Families are feuding. Boy R meets girl J. J's fam hates R. R's fam hates J. R and J kill themselves. That's Romeo and Juliet on a Twitter feed. Shakespeare would be shaking his head. And again, for those of you guys that have teenagers, the little short-term things with texting, it's again, there's no thought here. IDK, BRB, LOL, laugh out loud, LMAO, OMG, oh my God. That's how they communicate back and forth. Just these little snippets. If you do have older kids, though, teenagers like I do, watch out for these, by the way. You might not be familiar with these. PAW, parents are watching. I've seen that one before. A couple more for you parents. PAL, parents are listening. That means my parents are listening. I can't say. PIR, parents in room. A couple other ones. POS, you have a parent over your shoulder. And then my all-time favorite with the lingo, KPC. If you don't know KPC, keeping parents clueless. Love that one. KPC, keeping parents clueless. Sometimes I go off on tangents. I always vowed to stay in touch with the younger generations. It's so important as a psychologist to do that. It's hard. With a lot of this stuff going on, it's harder. Excuse me, having a horrible allergy day. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the cyberbullying. I don't know if you all know that 1 out of every 3 people, 33%, feel they've been cyberbullied in the past, and that's double the number that it was 10 years ago. So we're certainly headed in the wrong direction. And where is it happening? Instagram. Instagram's the biggest offender of cyberbullying, but you'll see it on Snapchat. You'll see it on Facebook. They're not far behind with it. And so how does this cyberbullying impact kids? Well, number one, it affects their ability to learn because they don't feel safe. How can you go off to school and learn if you don't feel safe because you're chronically cyberbullied? It leads to mental health issues, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts. Cyberbullying leads to medical issues, headaches, stomach aches, these psychosomatic concerns. It crushes kids' self-esteem and it hurts their self-confidence. So that's what we're seeing, and that's what I'm seeing as a psychologist. That's what you all may be seeing as parents. Let me tell you one thing that I am seeing, though, since coronavirus. It's not just the negative. So I can't go out and say that the technology is 100% a horrible thing. That would be very misleading. Kids during COVID-19 have stayed connected with social media when everyone has been quarantined, and I think people are obviously loosening up their quarantine restrictions as of late. But when people were really taking the quarantine stuff seriously, the only way that kids can stay connected is if with their video gaming for the Fortniters and the Call of Duties. That's how they stayed connected on their headsets, and through the for the other kids through the social media, the Instagram, the Snapchat, etc. So there is some good to it. I mean, how many of you all out there? How many of you guys participated in a Zoom happy hour with your friends or your colleagues? So there's some good coming from this. So I don't want to be totally skewed in one direction. That would be very misleading of me. Now let's talk about the important thing, what we can do about it. All right. And I broke down what we can do about it. I thought it'd be a little bit easier if we went by ages. But what you can do about it as a parent, for those of you guys that are in the audience today, modeling, as I said before, modeling is the key when it comes to social skills. Make modeling priority number one. You've heard the old cliche, don't be the parent who smokes a cigarette and tells your kid don't smoke. If social skills are important to you, and they must be, or you wouldn't be joining me today, be the one to model exceptional social skills, communication skills, listening skills, connecting, being able to network. So important. When kids see that, they'll have a much greater likelihood or tendency to do the right thing. So if you have infants at home, I'm sure some of you in the audience do. If you have an infant, birth up to 18 months, these are all good old Dr. Haley recommendations. I know other people say different things, excuse me, but these are my recommendations for screen time. For infants, my recommendation is no screen. It's very formative time for the young developing brain. No screen time at all, other than short, limited Zoom, FaceTime chats with maybe family out of town, with grandma who may live up in New York. Things like that are different, but for very brief periods of time. And obviously, we don't want to use screen time for infants as a replacement for one-on-one interactions. So very, very, very limited with the young ones. For the toddlers, this may surprise you, but again, I've worked with toddlers in the past. Tablets are not horrible for toddlers if it's very limited, because there's a ton of good learning tools. They've had some people come up with some awesome educational, very creative people come up with some awesome educational apps for toddlers. So it's essential, I think, that we prepare young kids for this 2020 technological world that we're in now. Can you imagine what the world's going to be like when a toddler turns adult? An adult, 16, 17 years from now, it's even going to be more. So we want to prepare the young ones for the world that they're about to be raised in. Excuse me. But we have to limit them. We have to. Absolutely, if you have a toddler, resist the urge to give the toddler a tablet so you can get a break. And I know, again, having parented 4 kids, breaks are needed. They're essential. And it's so easy to hand a kid a tablet. It works. It's a virtual guarantee that it's going to keep that toddler occupied for extended periods of time. But the goal here is to limit it. Again, opinions vary. For a toddler, a 3-year-old, etc., up to 1 hour a day would be my recommendation for you, and typically only for these educational tools that are out there. For preschoolers, I'm going to say a little, maybe the time's going to be the same, but again, there's several top quality educational apps out there for this age range as well. We have to remember that some of these app developers are just out to make money. So you want to read reviews with these educational apps. Try the apps yourself, obviously. Get in there and get down in the trenches with your child. Have that tablet or that device and watch these educational things with them. For this age range, again, up to an hour is considered appropriate from a social skills standpoint and from a brain standpoint for the younger ones. Even with, I'm going to take it a step further, even with elementary schoolers, so this is up through 6th grade, so you're talking 10 and 11-year-olds, I'd stick with the 1 hour a day. Now with the distance learning, I'm hearing, unfortunately, a lot of parents, because the schools have been pretty good about allowing breaks, but I'm hearing that the kids during their breaks are turning to screen time. My recommendation for y'all is I wouldn't allow elementary schoolers to have a tablet or have their device during distance learning. I'd get them moving. I'd get a kid moving, get them up, get them outside if the weather's okay, get them walking around the house or doing something that takes their brain away from the blue light electronic stuff. And what I would also encourage you, if you have an elementary schooler, excuse me, I'm sorry, is to start to teach your kids to maintain their own time limits, even to set a timer and to limit them to that up to 1 hour per day, but try to teach them responsibility in the process. Now, also with the elementary schoolers, you got to start being mindful. You don't want to be leaving tablets out in the open. Probably not a good idea during distance learning to have any devices on a table nearby. The temptation is just too great. I can see myself as maybe a 5th grader doing distance learning, and I'm looking around, mom's not around, and I don't have my camera on because a lot of the teachers don't require the camera on. So a little device. Let me do a little Minecraft in the middle of my math lesson. Excuse me. For middle schoolers, here's where I'm going to change my recommendations. I think for middle schoolers, up to 2 hours per day can be warranted. Up to, with middle schoolers, that's a great opportunity for you guys to teach them. We work first and we have fun later. It's so important to teach kids this from a young age. I tell my kids that you go to work for 2 weeks and you work hard for 2 weeks, you get the paycheck on the Friday after the 2 weeks of work. Because if people got paid first, they might not work so hard. They might not even show up to work. We always want to teach our kids, we work first in life, so the electronics come later. And school obviously is the way you teach that with kids, is get your schoolwork done, finish your distance learning, get your homework done, and then your paycheck at the end, that's going to be your up to 2 hours of electronic time. And also with middle schoolers, don't forget, we want to teach them the balance in life of electronics, schoolwork, family life, social life, extracurricular activities, that there's a juggling act and a balancing act. I had a session today with a kid, and the parents have reported he was probably around 8th grade, so going to be 14. And the parents reported, he builds his life around the so it's the electronics are the priority, and let me fit in my schoolwork a little bit here, or my family walk here, or my baseball game there. But it's all built and centered. The gaming, the Fortnite that's the center of his life. So we're working real hard to make that a piece of his life, but just not the crux, just not the foundation, or building everything around that. And finally, for the high schoolers, I think sticking with the 2 hours, up to the 2 hours, is reasonable. Obviously, no screen time during family meals, whether you're eating in your home or now we see it all the time. My wife and I were just out to dinner, we had a date night at a nice restaurant, and the family of maybe 5, all the tablets routed, fine dining, and no headsets. Everyone can hear it. And it was, it's just, you can't allow that. That's just not okay. Also, obviously, and this is true for middle schoolers, you want to know what your kids are doing on there. So be mindful of where they're going. I have 2 teenage boys here. The other 2 are girls, obviously, but my teenage boys, they're more into the first-person shooter games, the Call of Duties, so like 16 plus, but like the Call of Duties and the Fortnites. And what you hear a lot is with that sort of gaming, with like an NBA 2K sort of gaming, whole bunch of trash talk. I don't allow it in my house, but there's a whole bunch of trash talk and swearing and nastiness. And again, you don't want to allow that. It reinforces a really low frustration tolerance. And frankly, it's just disruptive in the home. So be mindful of those that are screaming on the headsets. When your kids say everyone's doing it, there's an element of truth to that. But in my house, just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean you're going to be able to get away with it as well. So let's help those kids out and practice that stuff. Up to 2 hours per night for high schoolers. And finally, I wanted to address that cyberbullying, because you want to be able to recognize if your child is being a victim of the cyberbullying. As always, we want to look for changes in behavior, but in particular, and there's a whole bunch of changes in behavior that I'm not going to go into today. I can do that in another webinar. But in particular, what I've noticed, the biggest red flag for your child being cyberbullied is if they suddenly quit social media. If they take their Instagram and their Snapchat and Facebook or whatever and just dump it all and say, I'm done with it. That is, to me, has been, in my experience, I've seen lots and lots of kids that have been cyberbullied. That's red flag number 1. So pay very careful attention to that. Also, we also want to talk about, can you recognize if your child is being the bully? Now, very few parents focus on that. So you will know. Well, it's harder. It's harder to figure out if your child is being the bully because they're tricky about it. They're tricky. They're crafty in a bad way. It's all done behind the scenes. If you notice your child is quickly putting their phone down when you're coming by, or you hear that click, 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 like they're Xing out of something right away, or if they're really secretive about what they're doing, that potentially can be a sign that they are bullying. Obviously, it can potentially be a sign of many other things too. But figuring out if your kid is a cyberbully is a challenge, and it's tough. You got to keep your eyes open. You got to know what your kids are doing. It's hard. It's hard because in the click of a button, I could be on one thing. My screen's in front of me, and with one click, I could be visiting a sports page or something. It's that easy to do these things now, which is unfortunate. And some of you probably out there are I guarantee some of you are saying, yeah, that's cool there, Haley. You talk about this 1 hour, you talk about this 2 hour, those are all fine and dandy limits. Yeah, that's great, but my kid, he's way past that. I'd be happy to get him to 2 hours. I'd be happy to get him down to 3 hours. You're recommending this 2 hours a day, but my teenager is on Fortnite 6 to 8 hours per day on a school night, and on Saturday morning he gets up and he plays all day, and the same with Sunday. So it's almost, for kids like that, it's almost addiction like. And I know there's several of you that are watching right now that you guys fall in this category. So for me just to talk about the 1 hour and the 2 hour, I think that would not be serving you all unless I dealt with this. So if you have a child who's in the extreme usage group, here's what you do. All right. You all know when it comes to addiction, alcohol, drugs, gambling, the treatment is called abstinence. Cold turkey, stop it. We got to get that person to stop. With technology, it's different. So in the field of psychology, in the field of mental health, when it comes to extreme usage with technology, video gaming, social media, we treat these addictions more like a food addiction. You can't abstain from food. So we don't, for someone who's addicted to food, we don't teach abstinence. We teach monitoring and limiting. That's how we deal with the technology addiction. First and foremost, for those of you that fall in this category, we've got to try to get your child on board with the plan. If you can get your child understanding, yes, this is a problem, that makes changing so much more easy. Some kids will buy into it. Other kids are like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with my 12 hours of Fortnite on a Saturday. I'm not harming anybody and I'm having fun. And this is how I connect. That's what they're going to tell you. But explain to them why you're doing this. Explain to them why it would be beneficial for them to take their 6 hours and get it down to a reasonable 2 hours. And we do this by, number one, let's start tracking usage. This might be hard to do, but do the best you can if you're a parent. So if your child is gaming upstairs and the door is shut, when they walk in and shut the door, mark out whatever time, 1 p.m. And then when they come out 4 p.m., 5 p.m., mark it down. And when they go back after dinner at 8 p.m. and you're going to bed at 11 and they're still on, mark these times down. If you can track usage and bring reality to light, that can sometimes compel kids to want to start making changes. Now, as far as the kid who's, I'll just use an example, 6 hours per day. Again, we're not going cold turkey. We're not abstaining. What we're going to do is we're going to start decreasing the time in small, manageable increments. My recommendation is 15 minutes. And we're going to make changes slowly over time. So 6 hours, if the child is used to that, let's go for 5 hours and 45 minutes for a few days, then 5 hours and 30 minutes, and so on and so forth. Again, if we have a child who's on board with the plan, it's going to be much easier than someone who's very resistant to it. And by the way, if you have a child who's really, really resistant to it, where that addiction is showing, then professional help oftentimes is warranted. There's a lot of video game addiction specialists that are now becoming experts in this only because of what's been happening. So we're going to reduce it by 15-minute increments. They'll respond better to smaller changes with that. And then we're going to do other things like keeping phones, laptops, and things like that out of the bedroom, so there's no access at night. If I were 17 years old and my phone were readily available and I had issues with it, I wouldn't be surprised if I were on there back in the day, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. So I get why they do it. I'll go off on another tangent. Empathy goes a long way. And if we can understand that there's a great pull, there's a great desire to participate in this stuff, then as parents, that will help us in our judgment and help us in our interventions and our interactions with our kids. And I think finding other ways to socially connect. I know it's been much harder during the pandemic. but finding other outlets, I think, is or other substitutes. The addiction specialists are always going to recommend substituting that behavior with something else that hopefully is fun. And since COVID-19 took us over back in March, that's why we've expanded our services and started doing the telehealth groups. Now 20 telehealth groups a week is we've made it our mission to try to keep these kids socially connected during a time when through no fault of their own they weren't able to do so. And if you ever run into any struggles with the extreme usage, I said a specialist are warranted. I'm always an email or a phone call away. If you ever have questions, I'd be happy to at least point you in the right direction. I'm not a video game or an addiction specialist. I'm a social skills specialist, but I know good people that are out there that should be able to help. Excuse me. What? I just lost. Screen sharing has stopped. Give me 1 second. I think I can figure this out. This happened to me one time before, but I don't want to lose you. Minimize. I think I may have lost my slide. 1 second. There it is. Let's see if I can get it up again. So funny because now I've lost me. Okay, slideshow. I thought I was doing so well right until the very end. Just give me 1 second. Play it from start. Okay. I'm not sure what you guys are looking at. Hey, Edith or Doris, can you guys put in there what you're seeing right now? Because I have no idea what you're all looking at. Can you all see me still? You just see me? All right. Well, the last slide was the conclusion side, and I can talk you through it anyway. But let me say this. I'm glad you can see me. So you probably have me, the big me, which is fine too. And like I said, I'll share the information that I had on that last slide. And one of my favorites, I'm big into sports. One of my favorite sportscasters, his name is Chris Berman. When he's talking about an elite athlete, someone who's awesome, like the best, he would say, you can't stop him. You can only hope to contain him. And I believe the same is true for technology, that we can't stop it, but we as parents, we can hope to contain it. That's, in a nutshell, that's the moral of the webinar today. And I have to say, I'm ashamed. Well, I'm disappointed and ashamed to say that a lot of the app companies out there, a lot of the gaming companies, they hire people like me. Not me, I would never do it. But they hire people like me, psychologists, and pay them big bucks, I'm sure, to hook these poor kids, and into social media too, to hook people in. It's sad. They push for addiction to make things as stimulating as possible, to get the kids to crave more, to keep it on your mind all the time. And it's just sad. It's sad that people would actually do that. But as I said, the responsibility of limiting this, it falls on me, it falls on you as the parent. And in 2020, it's been a tough year, but this is one of the biggest challenges that we're facing, and especially due to the pandemic in a summer that was filled with electronics for a lot of kids. I mean, they couldn't get out. So now school starts, we're up here, we're doing the distance learning, but you're trying to take the kids that had this much. Now to try to limit them down to this much. And unfortunately, with most change, the hard work is the upfront work, and things may get worse as you try to limit this stuff. Things may get worse before they get better. That's okay. That's okay. Stick with it. Be strong. Be firm. Be consistent. That to me is what it's going to take. And as I just said, here at the Social Skills Center, we're working hard to keep kids connected. We've been doing it for 20 years, and we're working especially hard to keep our large group program going so that kids can stay connected and participate in one of our social groups, one of the 20 different groups that we have going on now. So if you're a resident of Virginia, we can help. If, from Roanoke to Richmond, and I guess from the Newport News and Norfolk, all the way up to where I am in Northern Virginia, we're here to assist you. As always, I'm a phone call away. I'm an email away. You can't see my phone number, but I'm going to give it to you because I lost that slide. My number is 571-285-1403. My extension, my confidential voicemail is extension 1. So if you click that, you will get to leave me a voicemail. My email, Dr. Haley, DRHALEY at social, SOCIAL, skills, SKILLS, center, CENTER.com. For those of you guys that are on Facebook, we have our Facebook business page, which is the Social Skills Center. Please check it out and like us on that. And we have a 300 plus member Facebook group. It's called Social Skills Circle. People from all around the world participate in that. I'm really proud of that. Feel free to join us at any point and at any time there. Let me open it up to any questions. Here's our 2 options for questions, by the way. If you want to raise your hand, you can speak and then everyone will be able to hear you, or feel free to use the chat. And what I've been finding a lot in the webinars is that a lot of people, just for whatever reason, they like to email me personally to talk about their child and for me to offer recommendations. And I'm totally fine with that too. I know a lot of people have a more personal thing that they want to share. So I'll open it up right now. We've got a couple, I for one of the few times I actually ending on time. Usually I go over. So if there are any questions, please let me know. And if not, that's fine. Just shoot me an email with any questions or comments that you have. I'm really good with getting back to people. I will be, I don't know when the next webinar is scheduled. We've been doing them maybe every 2 weeks or so. I'll keep you posted through an email on that. As always, I appreciate all of you that attended today. I hope you find the information helpful. For any sort of social skills stuff at any point, at any time, please let me know. Thank you again. I very much appreciate your attendance. Now I'm going to try to end the webinar. Let's see if I can even figure that one out. Let's see. I have slides up. Okay, save. Oh, I figured it out. Bye, guys. Have a great evening. Thank you again for attending.